Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another podcast for the ACE Your Assessments series. Thank you very much for watching all of them so far, and many of you know that we are now on YouTube as well, which is brilliant. And today we've got with us Dr. Lize Mills. Hi, Lize. Thank you very much for
Hello,
coming.
Helena.
Thank
My
you for coming.
pleasure.
So we've got a few details about you, Lize. So you've started, well, you've got 20 years of teaching experience, and you've been lecturing previously at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, which is, my question would be, why on earth did you go to England? But no, we are grateful for having you at DMU, definitely. I think you joined in 2022, didn't
I
you?
did, yes, indeed.
And your field of expertise is in child and family law, and of course, you've written and published quite a bit in a number of issues that you are very passionate about. And of course, you're always understanding students, and you empathize with them because you've done a lot of research. And you know that it's not always easy to have articles published, and you know how difficult it is to receive criticism. So students need to understand that you get them, you're on the same page, and we are all on the same page, aren't we? We all know what it
Indeed.
takes to polish our piece of work, and how much work went into that, and you know how do it all starts with a plan, doesn't it? Um, and also, there is one thing that I want to share with the students that you would not mind them knowing is that you used to get paid for watching new releases of movies before everybody else was
Yes,
getting to that. Is that?
yes. That was a really, really cool job, I have to say. Well, it was a part-time venture. As a member of the Film and Publications Board in South Africa, I had the privilege to watch movies. So we were the body responsible, much like Ofcom here. So we were the body that is responsible for the classification of films. So before they were released to the main audience, the big screen, then we would have to classify and put an age restriction onto that. So yeah, I've always been interested in freedom of speech, and that's a very classic example of
Oh,
how do we manage and regulate freedom of speech when it comes to children and what they're allowed to watch, and even sensitive viewers, what would they not want to see. So really enjoyed that
wow.
little role that I played.
I love that. And you know, did it involve a lot of popcorn?
No, do you know, funny enough, we were three people sitting in a really ugly little room, and there were no, you had to bring your own, so it was normally just
Oh,
coffee. So nothing
all
exciting
right.
like that, no.
Oh, okay. Well, Lisa, I've got one question just to start us off. You know, why is it that you think the topic that we're talking about today, particularly, is important? You know, we're talking about how to develop a legal research plan.
Well, yes, Eleanor, thank you very much. I'm so glad I can speak about this. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to share my screen.
Oh, yes, please. Take your
So,
time as well.
yeah, because it needs to just load. Um, so, um, gonna
Yes,
go,
I
here we
think
go.
so. Yes, yes,
And you
please go
can
ahead.
you can see everything clearly there, I hope.
Yes.
Right. So I think it's incredibly important to speak about this, and I know that many of my colleagues have also spoken about, other factors about, writing, and I'm so grateful that you're doing this podcast series, Eleanor. It's really, really good. So to help students understand, but I think this topic of mine obviously is the most important one
I was
because
going to say.
because if you don't plan, it's just not going to work out. And I know there are many sayings about planning, but I decided to go with this one from Alice in Wonderland because I think, it captures, sorry, not captures, it captures the essence of planning so well. If you don't have a plan, if you don't know, like Alice said, she doesn't really care of where she wants to go, then it doesn't really matter. So you
Mm.
need to decide where it is that you want to go, and to get there, you need to plan, because it makes a real difference if you don't do that planning, and your presentation or your essay, whatever it is that you are doing, is just not going to work out. So even for me today to just talk about this, I had to do a bit of planning.
Yeah.
And like I also said, whenever I start researching, I've got a chapter in a book that I'm planning for now. I do practice what I preach, not always, but in this case, I definitely have done the same things that I'm going to tell the students about here. And so I hope that the tips and advice that I give you will make sense for all of us today.
Yeah.
It's just really, it is my personal approach to things.
Mm.
So the first thing that I want to say is that it depends here on whether or not you've got a topic that was chosen for you, or if it's one that you can choose. So it depends on the assessment, obviously. So sometimes I know when we write essays, or we give students the option of doing an assessment that is a presentation, then we normally give you a topic, or you can choose a topic. So it really depends on the assessment type. But if you have the choice of choosing your topic yourself, I think the first thing that you have to ask yourself is, what am I passionate about? I so often, especially master students, I suppose, they come to me and say, "Can you give me an idea of what I can talk about?" And I want to say always to them, "No, it's your choice. You have to feel passionate about what it is that you want to write about, and it has to be something that you want to learn about. You want to know the answer to these things, or it must be something that has upset you before, that you think, oh my goodness, why do we do this? Why does the law regulate it in this way? Shouldn't it be done differently? So it really is crucial that you like what you write about. And then even if you don't have the choice, if you have been given maybe 3 or 4 topics to choose from, still then go for the one that you are more passionate about and more enthusiastic about. And I think you then do the same thing for both of these instances. I would then really recommend that you dissect the topic, what you have got here in front of you, either if you choose your own topic, or if you get a topic and you then choose a particular one, then you have to dissect that topic. And this is where mind maps, and you will hopefully see this presentation
Yes.
works in
Yes.
the same way.
It does. It's working.
Yeah, so mind maps, I really do believe it, and I know that some people don't enjoy them. I really am a big fan. And I then put the topic right in the middle, and I dissect the topic. What is it that the question is asking from me, or what is it that I want to explore, depending on, how your essay works. So put key words in those little, blocks, or however it works for you, but
Mm.
make sure that you understand what the topic is about. What is it that you're trying to understand, to research and write about here? And the very crucial thing for me is I've got several mind maps. They go through a development stage or a process. And the more I read, the more
Mm.
that mind map changes. So I may start off thinking that a topic is about certain things, and then I start reading. And I think students must please appreciate this. You cannot write if you haven't read. And now
Mm.
I know many of my other colleagues have spoken about this as well, but the more you read, you're going to see maybe there's some perspectives or paradigm shifts that happen, and you have to go back to that mind map and then change sort of,
Mhm.
the things that you thought that this topic is about, if that makes sense.
That
Um,
makes absolute. I mean, we are talking about how to develop a legal research plan. So I think the sense that I get from you, or the message, I suppose, is that you can start with a plan based on what you know, because we all have limited knowledge on a particular point when we start out. And then
Absolutely.
we are developing this research plan, and we're tweaking it as well, taking into account what we like about the topic, not necessarily like, that's if you've got the choice, obviously, but what we found out in the interim about the topic, and then that develops into the key issues, and like you said, put key words in your
Yeah. Yeah.
mind map, and so the mind map will then help you develop your, and I suppose funnel down your research plan further and further, depending on how much, every single time you read more, you know that
Yeah.
different points within your research plan will be developed in a different way. So yeah, I think, am I getting the message
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, Elena, because I think that is crucial, what you've just said. It's a developmental process. It is something that you go back to. And I always say to students as well, even if we, sometimes we as tutors or lecturers, we force you to submit a plan. That plan is not cast in stone, and it is a process. And um, I'm not going to hold you ever to the fact that you said initially this is what you're going to do. And now you've started reading and you're like, maybe that wasn't the correct approach. But I wish I could show you some of my mind maps where I've crossed out so many things, or I've moved things around, or I've said, no, this is not going to work for this particular paper. So it is a process, absolutely. So go back to your mind map, cross things out. You know, don't don't feel that you are tied down by your initial plan ever. Um, and even when I don't know what it was like for you, Eleanor, but my doctoral research, I remember I set out with a very definite plan, and somewhere along the way,
Sorry,
don't know if it was for you,
it's
but
funny.
my focus changed, and I realized my preconceived ideas
Mm.
didn't actually work, and it wasn't the result that I expected. But I changed my perception. So my initial plan was altered, and students shouldn't ever be worried about that or frightened to change along the way.
I
So
like that you said it like that, because honestly, it's so funny that so many of us start with our preconceived ideas, and there's this hypothesis that I want to try. Not even try, like this is what
I
it
want to
is.
prove it.
And but yes, and usually 2 months in, and even 1 year in, and sometimes right up, on the brink of you finishing
Yep,
your write up for
yep,
your PhD or your dissertation for that matter,
yeah,
any piece of work,
yeah,
you really, there's like this is why we're saying trust the process. You get to a point and you think, oh my goodness, why was I thinking that? How did I think that? But you do, because our knowledge is limited at
yep,
whichever stage in the process of the research we are. So we are developing our understanding, and so we have to be willing. Don't hold on to. I say to students, write a paragraph, but don't be too precious about it. Don't take it
yes,
personal. You can change it. You can take it. It's okay to delete chapters. I've deleted
yes,
chapters out of my
yes,
research. So yes, we have to be able to adapt and adopt and be flexible, depending on how our mind absorbs the information and how our mind feels that
yep.
this research plan is developing. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. You are spot on, Eleanor. You can see that you've also done this a couple of
Oh
times,
yeah.
haven't you?
Yeah.
So, on that point of reading, now I know my colleagues, and I think it was particularly Pina that have spoken about sources. So, I just wanted
Databases,
to,
yes.
yeah, just to show you that we all share the same ideas, and we all have the same experiences. So, just on that point, on sources. Now, I've said this to my students, the groups, the seminar tutors, our seminar groups that I've had before.
Mm,
Um, you're not going to know, sometimes you're not going to know much about the topic at all. I mean, the chapter that I'm writing now, I sort of have an idea, but I have to take a different approach. So where do I start? And I'm going to be honest, I start with Google. I start with Wikipedia, but only to get the basics of this topic, just to get an understanding, what is it that this is about? What is this topic about? And the moment you get the key concepts or the key terms, that's what I use Wikipedia and Google for. But please, you are never, ever going to acknowledge in your bibliography or your reading list, your sources list, that you started
Or
with that.
or in a podcast.
Or in a
Don't
podcast.
acknowledge.
Are we recording this?
Yeah, that's okay.
No, in all honesty, I
I
then move.
know, I get it, I get it, I get it. Google it to
You go,
understand the concepts because you you need to have the language, don't you?
yes,
Um, like you said, when you create your mind map, you need to have your source in the middle, and then you have to fill in the key points or the key issues. But
exactly.
if you don't have any knowledge about how are you going to take the key issues and then research them. So no, yeah, it makes absolute sense.
And also you need those key terms to do the search in your proper academic legal databases. So you
But
need to go to Hein Online and you need to know what is it that you're looking for here. And so please, if I can just beg students, we do want you to write academic pieces. So use those academic databases that I think Pina has instructed you to go and use. And I know we do this in ELs and all of the other modules,
yeah,
but use those keywords that you found and then have proper sources to take your argument further. And like I said, you're going to now adjust that mind map, that plan. And on that point, then you're going to also ask yourself, what is it exactly that I'm trying to research here? So you will see my mind map is very fluid on this, if I can explain it that way. But sometimes your research question is going to be literally your statement of fact, your topic that you were given or you chose in a research question format, in a question format. So you're literally just going to swap the words around and put a question mark at the end. But sometimes your research questions are also going to be a bit more in depth, where you're going to start thinking, right, to answer this main question, what am I going to have to ask as well? What am I going to have to answer to get to this main question that I'm trying to establish? Um, Part of this research question, I think that you also need to set out for yourself. Sometimes, if you have to submit a research proposal, be very clear about what it is you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. What can you do and what can't you do? How is your paper limited? Because sometimes you're going to be limited. Well, most obviously, you're going to be limited by your word count, but you're also going to be limited by the topic. So, what falls outside of this, topic? What am I not going to speak to? What question am I not going to answer? So that you have it very clear in your own mind. And like I said, sometimes, but that's another topic for another discussion. Sometimes you're going to then, make it clear in your paper that you're not going to get to those questions either. But yeah, make it clear to yourself what is it that you're going to answer. And then at the same time, what I also like to do, apart from the mind map, is to have a little bit of an index page. I set out a little categorization or a bit of a flow chart now. So the mind map is very all over the place. It's just, my thoughts, my ideas, the key concepts, things that I think I need to address. But I then go and have a little bit of more structure to it. So then I go to a little index. I'm going to start with my introduction. In this introduction, I'm going to explain, why am I covering this topic? What is the problem? What's the rationale for this issue? Then in my main body, I'm going to address these topics, these questions. And then in my conclusion, I am going to take everything together. I'm going to come up with a couple of suggestions, and remember that in your conclusion you don't introduce more topics, you just summarize of what you have said. But like I said, that's also a topic for another day. I'm just trying to make students understand how
Mm.
all of these things have to be conscious in your mind while you are planning, while you're coming up with your ideas for this essay or this presentation or whatever else it is that we're asking you to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
sorry, and then finally, just the last thing, and I think sometimes we forget about this, but I need to work with deadlines. If I don't
All
have
right.
deadlines, I really do not function very well. So um
I
I
was going to
always,
ask you about time management. Yeah, it's very important, isn't it? Well,
yeah.
we're saying it's very important because it is. I mean, deadlines are, submission time.
Oh
If you haven't
goodness.
submitted, then what was the point of all the stress?
Well, yes, once again, but I don't know. Normally, deadlines are also moved, but I know for students they are quite tight
No,
sometimes. But
don't
just
say that.
remember,
You'll break their hearts. Our deadlines can move, yours can't.
well,
But no, it's true.
our deadlines are also very tight sometimes. So just understand we also go through this, and especially as lawyers, we are tied to deadlines, court submission dates, and I don't know whatever else. Let's not go there. But
Yeah.
if you plan your essay or your assignment, I think it's crucial to have a little time management in your research plan. Make a little schedule for yourself. And what I normally do is just to go backwards. I start with submission date. So I've got a deadline now of the 1st of October for an abstract that I have to submit. Not there yet, by the way, but I know that I have to now work backwards. What do I need to do by the 1st of October? And for students, I think what we fail to do quite often, I definitely do it as well, is to acknowledge that I have to have editing time. I could have written something, but I need to, before the submission date, if you work with your timeline, there needs to be a deadline for when you're going to be editing what you've done. So part of your plan, bear that in mind. It's not going to be a perfect piece of work. And please, please read what you've written, because I do this. I think I say something on, paper because it's all here. The brain is connected to the hands, and I type and I do what I think I say. Well, I type what I think is in my head, and it's going to come out. Well, sometimes it doesn't even work when I speak, as you can see now. So you have to be very careful that in your planning, allow for time to read through your work again, that you actually are saying what it is you think you are saying. Read it out loud to yourself, read it out loud to a friend, and then you're going to see it doesn't really always make sense as you thought it does. And like I said, it's true for myself as well. So come back to your work after a break, after you've taken a step back. And that's why I'm saying build it into your plan, into your research plan. Um, Maybe you can use a checklist. Sometimes I work with a lot of lists. It's always very satisfying to cross off something off that list. And then also what is helpful sometimes is to work on just a particular issue at a time. So part of your plan is also to see which areas you think is going to take a bit longer, to just wrap your head around, to digest what it is that you are trying to understand here. Um, and yeah, always just make sure that when you allow yourself that time, that you have enough time to make sure you've answered the question. Basically, you've answered your own research question, you've answered the question that the assessment is asking you to do. So, yeah, everything like coming back to that very important point of doing what it is that you're supposed to be doing. So
Mm.
yeah, that basically is what I wanted to say again. But I think the most important thing is that plans are important, but plans change. So just to bear that in mind.
Now, in your experience, Lisa, are there any common mistakes that students should, stay away from or learn from your mistakes? Because I know that we all,
Ooh.
oh, yeah. What do
Um,
you?
oh, good grief. I think, yes, the mistake that the one that I've mentioned now about thinking that you are saying something and then you're not actually saying that, or you miss words, or I've so often thought, oh my word, what is it that I was trying to say here? So, same thing with all of us. Writing isn't perfect from the start. It is something that we need to acknowledge. None of us are perfect. I certainly am not. And none of us can just immediately spew everything out in a perfect format. So go back to it and be willing to change things. Like you said, Eleanor, be willing to delete chapters or paragraphs or sentences. It's not cast in stone until you've submitted it.
Yes,
But
exactly.
even then, you can still change. But you have to plan. You have to plan.
Hmm. I like that you said that because I always say to my students, the value is not in writing, the value is in rewriting. Because
Yes.
revisiting your work means you have fresh eyes, hopefully. Like you said, you would have done your checking, you would have done your out loud reading of chapters or sections. You would have proofread your work, hopefully, because obviously we all want a professional looking or as professional as possible. You just do your best. Your best can be, brilliant. But work on progressing on your own skills in your own
Mm,
time,
mm,
and based on trying to get better than what you've done yesterday. And you can only do that if you're not being very personal with your own work and you're willing to rewrite things. And this is
yeah.
where I think the beauty of a piece right at the end of it, when it's finished and you can see how it all came together, how it all started with going back to mind maps, like you were saying. Some people start with post-it notes all over the wall, and you
Yes.
can take those post-its off and replace them with others. And you can, as your specific topic is refined by you, because even though, let's say, we've got on the one hand, it could be an essay, but we could also do a problem question, and the same research plan goes into both of them.
Yeah.
And again, we've talked about essays. I think Alan did, essays versus problem questions, but he just focused on one of them. Um, but that's what it is. You just have to go with it and see where it starts and then refine it as you go on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sorry, you've reminded me of something, and what I forgot to say as well is, yes, this plan also applies to when you have to answer a problem question. So same thing. What are the elements of this problem question? What happened here? Same thing, use a mind map and put out all of the, this happened to this poor person and then that happened. So maybe do it in a sequence, or plan in the same way you would have done to write an essay on, a statement of fact that you have to analyze. And the other thing, sorry, that you've reminded me of now is when you do your sort of schedule, be honest with yourself. You know yourself, and I am a procrastinator, absolutely. So I know that I will probably leave things up to the last minute, but I also know that when I've got a lot of teaching in my schedule, I need to be honest about myself, honest with myself about the fact I'm not going to have time to focus on my research. Or when you've got other assessments that need to be submitted, or you have got a weekend planned away with your friends or your family, put that into your schedule and be honest with
Mm.
yourself. You are not going to work at that point with it. So bear that in mind when you do your planning, so that you just build in a bit of a buffer, and you're going to be okay. So you don't cause yourself unnecessary stress, which we all have.
Yes.
But if you can be kind to yourself in that way, I think.
Yeah, we all need to be mindful that it gets to you, and it's better to have a relaxed mind and start your work than be stressed about things because you've piled on too much on yourself.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, take breaks. Another, I'm curious about this because you've got so much experience. I'm just going to ask you the questions now. How do students prioritize sources? Because I think very often when you're planning something, you want to some students either include everything or others struggle sometimes to decide which sources should I introduce as part of my work and how
Wow.
many should I use?
Yeah.
I know there's no
That
right answer for it,
no,
but
absolutely, but it's such a good question, Eleanor. I think from my experience, um, and I think this is where once again to come back to Google, you're going to start seeing, especially with some topics, you're going to notice that there are some people who have written a lot about a particular topic. And if you are using secondary sources, first now we're talking about journal articles and books, you're going to probably, I will start with books because those people have really done comprehensive research about their particular topic, but they have relied also on other resources. So I always say, and I do this really genuinely all the time, I look at the resource list of those books. Who did they consult? And yes, you are correct. You cannot use all of those sources, but you do get a sense of, these are the prominent authors about this particular topic. And well, the problem is also sometimes you don't agree with those topics or those authors and their sort of point of view. So then you're going to use what they've said, but you may just criticize or analyze it in a different way, maybe. Um, but then also remember your primary sources. So whenever you have to understand the legal position, and I'm thinking here specifically of problem questions where you have to answer, this is the scenario, how do we solve it? You're going to start with your primary statutes and your
yes.
interpretations of those statutes by the
Mm,
court. So that's going to be your point of departure. Um, and then you're going to also read about what other people have said about those statutes and those cases. And that's where your secondary sources come in then. But so I would absolutely prioritize statutes, legislation, international treaties. International treaties, obviously, always, a good place to start if it's a very general topic. And when we talk about human rights, what I write about quite
mm,
often, then you're going to start with those international pieces of law. But yes, it can become tricky to decide what secondary sources you are going to use. The golden key obviously here is to not use the internet sources, to stay away from the ones that you've just found on the internet when you did that Google search. And look, there are some lovely reports that you're going to find online. You're going to find law commission reports. Those carry a bit more status than your other secondary sources that you will just find online. But
mm,
the published academic peer-reviewed sources that you find on well, mostly in online, LexisNexis, Westlaw, those sources are the ones that you should consider inserting, and then rather stay away from the ones you just found online.
yes, sounds brilliant. Sounds like a plan. Sounds like
Well,
a
I
research
hope so.
plan.
Well, yes, that's
Oh.
always the plan, but
Plans
things
don't
change.
always go to plan. We should
Yeah,
say that to students. I think we kind of made that clear at the
yeah,
beginning. You just have to adapt and adopt. Now, so Lisa, we've talked about the key elements um, of research planning. We talked about the initial steps, the common mistakes. We talked about how we prioritize sources just now, time management, and how to stay on track and how to be realistic about your time, how to be realistic about you needing a break on a
yep,
weekend and just, take your time, prioritize things with you in mind as well, you, the person,
yes,
how to adapt and develop your research plan. We've talked about critical thinking without mentioning critical thinking, because obviously it's all about your decision and in your mind mapping and how you decide the sources that you're going to use. You're going to ditch some because you're not going to like them, or you don't agree with them, or maybe you're going to choose them because you don't agree with them as well. Um, and of course how to integrate all of this into your writing when you're actually starting to write your work. But there's just one last thing that I want to ask you, and that's, how does a student handle any last minute challenges, I suppose, when it comes to research, dealing with gaps in information, or
Mm.
what we think, at that stage, because maybe we still haven't done enough reading, because you could write a paper that only takes 2,000 words, and then you're doing a PhD about it, where we're like, we have to cover so much that it's a bit difficult for us to give a straight answer. So when we're talking about gaps in information, it could be gaps that we're not aware of yet, but obviously we've had just so much time to deal with the assessment, as opposed to having a lot of time like you do with a PhD. How
Yeah.
should we handle these last minute challenges? If you've got any tips.
Well, Eleanor, that's a really difficult question because, well,
I know
I
it
guess
is.
it.
I
No, no,
know.
don't worry. I'm not blaming you for it because it's a real question. um, the thing for me is though that if you have planned, if you have, really done the research, and I think I quite often with my master students, when I ask them, but have you read about this? Have you seen whether or not there are enough sources? And then quite often they come back and say, oh no, there hasn't been research. Well, you can either build it into your essay then, and you can say, unfortunately, not sufficient research has been done on this topic, and I think this is something that needs to be explored, or I recommend that, A, B, and C be done, or something like that. So hopefully you won't reach, if you've done your proper planning, you're not going to discover, oh, there is no research on my main question that I wanted to answer. But if it's one of your subcategories, then you be honest about it, that you haven't found any research or you haven't found any information on it. But this is where it comes back to your planning. And something that I think is also sometimes useful, but a bit dangerous. If you remember I spoke about that index page where you now categorize, or you put a sequence to what you're going to do, where, when, and how. You could build in a bit of a word count, and you say to yourself, I'm going to spend so many words on this. But
Mm.
why I caution against that is because you may find that you tie yourself too much into that word count. Then, you go over or you go less, and then you start panicking. And
No, but you
so
build that into the flexibility that we talked about at the beginning. So hopefully
exactly.
students will, take everything
Yeah.
with a pinch of salt, because it's their
Yep.
decision, isn't it? It doesn't have,
Yep.
no tutor is going to start marking an assessment and say, wait, is this issue so many words, 200 words
Exactly.
only? Unless,
Exactly.
okay, scrap that. Like, let me just, a disclaimer here for eels, for example, or whatever the case may be, that have a
Yes.
certain number of words. Guys, we didn't say that. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's all about being flexible within, what your
Yep.
assessment is. So what I would take from Lisa's messages, for example, if you're thinking you've got 2,000 words for a piece, assessment, either problem, question, or whatever the case may be, let's say it's an essay, and you can do, um, let's say, put 200, 300 words aside for the introduction and conclusion, and then the remainder number of words, obviously it goes back to the research plan. Let's say the research plan that you've come up with has uncovered three main issues about this particular topic that you're doing. So you could split it into three sections. So the remainder number of words of, if we're working with 2,000 words and we took out 300, we've got 1,700 words to split between the three sections. Or maybe there are five sections or 5 points or five
Yep.
issues that you need to develop. You don't have to tell the
Absolutely.
reader, I'm going to write 500 words on this point and 600. No, the reader just wants to read about it and it's
Exactly.
making sense. So if you feel like the second point might be a lot of a richer, maybe the second point needs to be split into two other or three other categories,
Mm,
then that might be a bigger one. So instead of, I don't know, let's say you've done 600 words for each because you have to give yourself a leeway, don't you? Um, you say maybe I'll do 400 words for the first issue and 600 words for the second issue. So yes, we I think students get it. You have to be flexible and you have to be willing to yeah, chop and change things
absolutely.
depending on how, depending on your knowledge, because this is going to be conscious decision based on information that you already have. Okay, it's going to be an informed decision. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Eleanor. You know what you're talking about.
Lisa, thank you so much for coming on this podcast, guys. We've talked about how to develop a legal research plan. For anything else that you might want to read about or listen to, not read about, why did I say read about? Listen to, then obviously listen to another podcast. But if you have any more questions for Lisa to develop because you've heard she's talking about something specific, then please let me know and then I will rope her into doing another podcast in the future, because obviously we're welcoming students coming up with ideas
Mm,
as to what we should develop in the future, to make sure that we cater for all of your needs, assessment wise. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Again, thank you very much, Lisa, for coming here today.
my
And
pleasure.
I'll say goodbye to everyone. We'll see you in the next one.
Yes. Bye.